All right, y'all. All right, we're going to get started here. First off, I want to say, man, mad ups to all the new people. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate you. Make sure that you wear one of them cards. I don't have a car, but yeah. Make sure you fill out one of these for us. That way we know where you live so we can come. No, we're not going to come by. I'm just playing with you. No, we'd just like to get you connected. You'll get put on a group chat. You'll get to know about the different things that are going on, the events. You'll get to know about things like tonight. Tonight we're starting a series called Toolbox. For the next 7 speakers, you will not hear me. You'll hear other people. Every now and then throughout the year, I like to get other people in front of you so that you guys can hear a different perspective. Especially for the ladies in the room, like to get some women of God in front of you so you can hear what they have to say. This year, our Toolbox series is on purpose. So all our speakers will be talking about purpose in some shape or fashion, okay? But tonight, you're gonna get, now I'm loving tonight because the young lady who's going to kick off the whole Toolbox series, just a little bit. I met her actually 2 years ago in Israel. And we went on I'm going to guess, I think my phone said something like 7.5, 8 mile trek up the side of a mountain. The two of us and 4 other people in Jordan. And Petra, it was where we started, but we went up there. Here's the reason why she's going to stand in front of you and speak. Because every person, there's a reason why they're going to speak. And that is, I love being around people with passion. Okay? If you have passion, then I'm going to gravitate towards you. I want to be around you because I know this, that people with passion pursue dreams. They pursue goals. And see, when we were talking, I found out she runs marathons. I found out all this stuff about her. She may even share some of those things. But when we're talking about purpose, you want to hear from somebody that has passion. You don't want to hear about somebody who kind of just sit back, say, I'm just chilling, I'm waiting for stuff to happen. No, you want to hear from somebody who's going after what God has placed in their heart and that what God is leading them in. And so tonight, I want you to give up a big round of applause for Gilly Garcia as she comes up. And I'm going to turn it over to her, and I'm going to let her do her thing. She get her microphone on. Oh, by the way, let me just say, I didn't tell her she was going to get recorded and had to stand in front of microphones. So, but that's okay.
I did not know I was leading this off, so I do apologize that I'm starting this series off. But no, it's good to be here. I call him my twin. We are so similar, it's almost scary sometimes. It's true. That's not made up. But I know this series is on purpose. We're supposed to be talking about purpose, how you find your purpose. But tonight I'm speaking on what if you don't know what your purpose is? What if you're just in a season where like nothing's happening, everything's falling apart? You know, what do you do then? Because I think that's the season I'm in right now of I really don't know what my purpose is in this season. If you look at it from the outside, a lot of things aren't going as you would want in your life right now. So that's where I'm at. So that's why I'm kind of talking on the, what do you do in the in-between? When you thought you had your purpose, and then you're kind of waiting to see what your purpose is. You're waiting to hear from God. You know, what do you do in those, in that time? We're all familiar with Jeremiah 29:11. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. And it sounds good on paper, but it's hard to walk sometimes. And what do we do when we're in that in between, when we don't know how long it's going to last? I've been in a season since December, and I'm like, all right, Lord, I'm ready. ready for this thing to end. You know, kind of help me out here. And people are quick to quote that to everybody when you're in a tough season. Oh, you know, don't worry. God has a plan for your life. God has a plan for your life. And sometimes it can just sound very cliche because it's just something easy to say, but it's hard to walk out when you're in it. And I just wonder, do we all know what Jeremiah 29:10 says, the verse right before? That verse says, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. So he made the Israelites wait 70 years before he fulfilled the promise. Now, I'm the let's get it done and over with type of person, so the thought of waiting 70 years for anything is just like overwhelming to me. But what are people doing in those 70 years that they're sitting there waiting for God to fulfill his promise? You know, they're supposed to be raising their families, they're doing their crops, they're having weddings, they're just doing life in those moments, which again is hard to do sometimes when you're wanting one thing and it's not happening, but you still have to continue to do, you know, just the daily routine, the daily grind of life. And, you know, and you question, where's God? What's God doing in all of this? And when I Googled the word plan, according to Merriam-Webster, it's the method worked out in advance for achieving some objective, to work out the details, to decide on and arrange in advance. So while the Israelites are sitting there in 70 years of captivity waiting for God to fulfill the promise, he's arranging things, he's planning things, he's working things out in preparation. He's preparing them for the next stage. So, you know, while we're in these in-betweens, he is preparing us, even though we can't always see it and it doesn't always feel like it. I can give you some examples of these. So I would say back in 2015, 2016 was the beginning of an extremely difficult season in my life. And so I'm not an animal person. I don't need an animal. I can love your dog, your cat. I don't want them. I don't need them. I don't even need a goldfish. But I've always said if I had a dog, it would be a dachshund. But I had no desire to go get one. So my son ends up with a dachshund, and then it ends up at my house. And this little dachshund was my buddy, my best friend. We did the whole nine, you know, I just loved him. And at the same time, I fell into running, the marathoning that he talked about. And this running was my obsession. So in order to marathon, your nutrition has to be on point. You got to get up every day and do your workouts, and you have to sleep. So when my season really hit, those two things kept me literally getting out of bed, making sure I was eating every day, and just didn't crawl in a corner and want to literally give up. And then Pastor Joseph touched on it, the trip to Israel back in 2023. If I hadn't gone on that trip, I wouldn't have met him. We wouldn't have connected. I would not be here today. And at the same time, God orchestrated friendships from that trip that are now helping me walk through this season that I'm in. So back then I didn't know, you know, I'm just going on a trip. But God was setting that up for this season in my life. So while we can't see what he's doing, he still is working and preparing for the tough times that he knows are coming. And I think he has, well, obviously we know he has wisdom, you know, but you just look and you think how wise that he's setting it up without our knowledge. Because had I have known, you think, I can't handle that. You know, I can't sustain what he's asking me to do. And he's, honestly, he doesn't care how long we're in these seasons. He's just concerned about what we're getting out of it and if we're growing in our relationship with him. So if we have to sit in a season a little longer than we want to, it's because he's trying to get us to grow and rely on him even more. I think most of us in here are familiar with these times being called the wilderness or the desert. You know, you'll hear people say, oh, I'm in a desert, I'm in a wilderness stage. But recently I heard this time referred to as chill time. And I love plants and trees, so it really, I was able to connect with this. And they were talking about a variety of fig tree called the arbequina that can actually grow in the States. And it needs a minimum of 300 chill hours each year to produce fruit. And if it doesn't get the 300 hours of chill, It can result in delayed or non-existent blooming. It may extend the bloom time and potentially lead to disease on the flower and reduce the fruit set and diminish the fruit quality. And in the article I read that it is essential for these olive trees to receive adequate amount of chill hours for optimal growth and productivity. And it only happens in the winter when the temperatures are below 45 degrees. And even though we can't see anything happening inside that tree during this time, there's a buzz of activity happening. It's getting it ready for the next season of growth. So when it's cold and gloomy and overcast and dark, the tree's dormant and it looks like nothing's happening, that's when God's at work preparing this tree for the next season. And when I heard that, that just kind of gave me something to hold on to. Okay, He is working. He is doing something, just getting me ready for the next season that He's bringing me into. And then so the question I ask is, are we willing to rest in Him during this time? Are we willing to be still and let Him do that work? I can say my answer would be no. I'm a doer. I grew up, we don't deal with things, we push it down, we move on. Let's just keep on going. So to sit still and actually have to deal with something is kind of against my nature, against my conditioning of how I grew up. But according to Merriam-Webster, the word dormant and the word rest are synonyms. So they mean the same thing. So when the olive tree is dormant, that's when God's preparing the next season of growth. So are we willing to be dormant so He can prepare us for our next season so we have optimal growth and productivity? And again, like I said, my answer before would have been no. One, it's just against my nature to sit back and relax. I'm a doer. I want to do it my way. Let me push through it to get it done. Even if it means going against, I hate to say we're going against, but even if it's contrary to what the Lord's wanting at that time, the way I've been conditioned and brought up is let's go, let's push through it, keep going. We don't rest in anything. And then two, to sit back and rest in the situations means we have to feel it. We have to allow those feelings that we've pushed down to come back up, and we have to deal with the hurt, the insecurities, the fears, the harm that's been done to us, maybe the harm we've done to somebody else. We have to be responsible for those feelings, that are being stirred up in us. And so there's been times when I just honestly just refused to deal with it because I don't want to. I don't think I was in a emotional position where I could. I wanted to deal with it, to be perfectly honest. I just, I guess you could say I was rebellious. I guess if we're not listening to the Lord, but because of that, I pushed it down. I had to deal with it later in life instead of letting go and letting Him take that burden off of me. It was more comfortable for me to hold on to it because it was something I knew than to be able to let go and then have to figure out what to do afterwards. I mean, it's sad that we get comfortable with the dysfunction that we're comfortable with, but at least it's security, and we know what it feels like, so it's comfortable, even though it's maybe not healthy in that. When I said, we have to be responsible for those feelings, what the Lord's trying to deal with us, it's because things do happen that are out of our control. Life does beat us down sometimes, but when that gets stirred up in us, we're the ones that have to deal with it. Nobody can deal with it, can work through it or deal with it. We're the ones that have to. And are we okay with ignoring and pushing something down and still being in the same state we are? And what I mean by that is, like in the past when the Lord has stirred things up in me and I refuse to deal with it, when that season kind of moves on, there's a frustration within me because I knew the Lord wanted to work on something, but I was so afraid to turn that over to Him. And now here I am dealing with the same issue. So it becomes this like hamster wheel that I'm on. I want to hand it over, but I'm afraid to hand it over. and then I'm frustrated with myself because I won't hand it over. And and that can go on for a few seasons until you're just at a place where you're like, I can't do this. It's worth the fear of letting go to be able to move past things. Let me tell you, some of these things aren't even, if you would tell someone about it, they're thinking that's all it is. That's not a big deal, but it has such a hold on you that you can't, that it becomes such a mountain in your eyes. But I think that's the question. Are you okay where you are if you refuse to let the Lord do that work in you? And in the past, I can say, I have been many times. I've been okay being frustrated because of the fear of letting go of that. And if we don't turn it over to the Lord, there's nothing he can do. He'll only work with what we give him. And he'll only work with what he wants us to work with. If it's our plan, he's not going to work the same way if it's his plan. Trust me, I've tried. And it just does not work the same way. And what I've learned is it all boils down to fear. You can say pride, you can say what it was, I've been hurt, I've been this, but why won't we let go? It's a fear of rejection, a fear of the unknown. But it all boils down to fear with us. And like I said, I've been in my chill hours of fears of my season of chill hours since December. And when I started, I honestly thought I knew what God wanted to work on. And Pastor Joseph had preached, I think, back in April, and his sermon was, like, just lean back, listen to what the Lord had to say. And I'm like, I know what the Lord wants. This is what he's working on me with. I think I even came up and told you what I thought the Lord was kind of stirring in me. And he was working on that, but there's been so much more since then that the Lord's been dealing with. And there's been so many insecurities and fears that he has brought up since December. And he's used the people that I went on the trip to Israel with to help walk through these seasons with me. Sorry, I just lost my place. I know for me, some of the things that he's dealing with is causing me to be vulnerable. And from just past experiences in life, I don't like to be vulnerable at all. I can sit and joke with him, and I can laugh, and I can cut it up. But when it comes right down to it, I don't want to be vulnerable at all. Because for me, vulnerability equals hurt. And so I try to avoid it at all costs. Like I said, I can cut up, and I can joke, and I can laugh, and I can do all that. But when it comes down to the meat of things, I just don't want to do it because of the pain. And so in this season I'm at right now, I was going back and forth of, do I say what I'm going through? Do I not say what I'm going through? But I'm just going to tell you, because it's going to sound, y'all be like, that's what that's it. So right now, my struggle is interviewing. So I'm interviewing for jobs. And I can talk to you for 7 hours and you'd be like, please shut up, would you? But when it comes to an interview, terrifies me. Sit there, I can't think. Literally, my brain shuts down. I'm just like, it's so hard for me. And so this is what's tripping me up right now. So I have a girlfriend I met in Israel, and she is taking time out of her day a couple times a week to sit with me, to work through this with me, to help me get past this block. And while it seems small, because y'all could probably interview all day long, for me, it is terrifying. And when I realized, okay, I need help with this, I had to be vulnerable. I had to reach out to her and ask for help. And when I asked for help, I had already prepped myself for the rejection of, I don't have time, no, I can't do this, whatever her reason would be. But her reply was, yeah, when do you want to start? And it just caught me so off guard. And then I realized that's how the Lord responds to us. When we come to him with something, his response is, yes, when are we starting? And it was just, those little things are what I'm learning through this season. The Lord's really digging in to the trust factor with him, and he's got me. And she and I were talking, my friend and I, about the convenience. We're all into a life of convenience. We can order anything and it's at our door. We have our schedule. I want to be home by 5. I want this. I want that. But sometimes God's calling us to do something to help somebody that requires our time and it requires effort. And are we willing to do that for people in their seasons? She could have said no. She's got a lot of things on her plate. And what I'm requiring of her takes a lot of her time. But she said yes. And that was monumental to me. And so I think, how many people have I said no to in their season? But it's, now it just makes me more aware of saying yes and going that little extra mile. So, it's just this is just a little side note I had, but as we're busy in our lives and we have all of our priorities and we want our downtime and we want our this time, sometimes the Lord's calling us to not be so comfortable, to not have your 2 hours of downtime before you go to bed or whatever, to help somebody out. Because you never know what a difference that's going to make in their life, where they're at that moment. But I do feel that because in this season, I've been expectantly waiting for the Lord. I truly have been. And because I felt his prompting in this matter, that I did the action this time, and that he is going to do that work, and he is going to move, and give me the job that I need, and just stretch me even more to where this isn't an issue. But I had to take that first step. I think it goes with, even though you have that stirring, that's not enough. You have to take action in that step, and that's the hard part. I think most of the time for us, for most people, is just taking that step forward. And then I think too, are we going to allow him to do the work he wants to do in us? He sees the end plan. We don't. Are we going to stick with him when things get hard? Or are we going to tap out when things get really uncomfortable? Like I've said in the past, I've tapped out because it's just gotten too uncomfortable for me. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to relive things. And I can tell you, it would be easier if I had my timeline. The Israelites had 70 years, so I knew they were stuck for 70 years. But if he was like, hey, Gilly, we're going to be in this for 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, and we're going to work on A, B, and C, I'd be like, okay, let me get my plan together. I can suck it up for 6 months. I can do this for 9 months, and this is kind of what I'll do. But in all of his wisdom, he knows then I wouldn't be relying on him. I'd be relying on myself. What can I do? What can I cut out of my life to make it through? So I think in his infinite wisdom, he graciously does not allow us to see his timeline because we would rely on ourselves and not him. And it's during these seasons, I can just testify to this, that when we feel the pressure, we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's been days you don't want to get out of bed, type of moments. That's where our relationship with him is forged. I think that's where we see him working. That's when we learn our faith. That's where those faith muscles really grow, is in those times where you just can't see the hope in things. And it's the same way as our muscles. I go back to our muscles because, working out and all that. Our muscles only grow under stress. It's when you're weight training or stressing, your muscles tear, and it's the repairing of the muscles that cause them to grow. And it's the same thing in our spiritual life. It's the pressure when we're overwhelmed, when there's only God to rely on, when it feels like, life is kind of tearing you up and beating you down, that God can come in and begin to repair, because I think that's when we let go. We can't do it on our own, so he can start coming in, and our faith in him grows stronger in those moments. And again, during these times, he feels like he's asking us to do the impossible. Let me tell you, this interviewing process feels like the impossible. And again, as silly as that sounds, it is so hard, and it is such a struggle for me. But all he asks us to do in these times is just to trust him. That's it. Just trust him. In Mark 5:36, it says, "Don't be seized with alarm and struck with fear. Just keep on believing." That's the Amplified version. So he's just asking me to trust him and walk through it with him. And he does the rest of it as long as I trust and walk through. And again, it doesn't matter what we feel, what we see, what we hear. He's just asking us to trust. And again, it sounds easy, when you're reading from a piece of paper, just trust the Lord. It's a whole lot harder when you're walking you need to trust the Lord. But again, it's a choice. We can choose to, or we can choose not to. And we can choose to ignore it. We can push it down. But it prevents us from growing. It prevents us from moving forward and being who God wants us to be and where he wants to take us. Some of the stories from the Bible I think of is Abraham. Abraham was told to sacrifice his son. So Abraham does it. He prepares. Isaac has to carry the wood. Abraham's carrying the fire and the knife, and they're trucking up a mountain. And you think, nowhere in the Bible does it say, Abraham doubted and Abraham this. How can that man have been like, okay, this is a good idea? I'm thinking, I'd be like, there's no way I heard this. You got to tell me 17 times and have 12 people come to me before I'm going to do this. But he does it. He does it through the doubt and the fear. You have Esther. She's told to go before the king to save the Jewish people. And she knows if she goes before the king, she could be killed. But when she got to the point of, okay, Lord, if I die, I die, that's when he could do the work. And then I think of Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. I'm a fan of those movies. There's a scene in there called The Leap of Faith, where Indiana Jones was going through a tunnel, and when he comes out, there's a giant crevasse to the other side. And he's got to cross it to get to his father. But there's no way for him to cross it. And as he's looking around, figuring out what to do, his dad calls from the other side and says, "You must believe, boy, you must believe." And so there's Indiana Jones looking around trying to figure out how to cross, and he's reading his little notebook of what the ancients said of how to cross it. So he's like, okay. So he's pulling himself together, and the movie does a great job of showing this fear and anxiety of him having to step out into nothing. And so as he steps out into nothing, when his foot hits, that's when the path shows. And he's able to walk across, but he had to have the faith to step out into nothing for something to appear. And that's what the Lord tries to do to us in these seasons. Step out into the nothing, because something is there. He's not going to let us fall, but do we trust him to take that first step? And again, in the past, I can say I've not done it well, and I've grown and I have done it well. And it doesn't get easier. But I think I trust him more to do it, but it's still scary as all get out when you have to take that step sometimes. So it's not just the prompting, it's our response to his prompting. Because what if Abraham and Esther said, forget this, I'm not doing it, I'm too afraid? Would we even know their names? Would they even be in the Bible? Would they be, we know they wouldn't have these great names after them, but would they even be notated in the Bible? And then who would Jesus' lineage still go back to Abraham? Would there be another name instead of Abraham if he had just tapped out halfway up that mountain? Because my faith is not that great. I will tell you that. I probably would have tapped out thinking, okay, I did not hear the Lord. I must be crazy. I'm out of here. Because I'm not going to sacrifice any of my kids. So I'm sorry. That's not where I am at right now. So it's my situation is like a grain of sand compared to what they're going through, but it's no less scary to me where I'm at. And I think we have to be careful not to judge ourselves against something else or somebody else's situation, because it's our life experiences that cause that anxiety or that fear. And it's real and it's valid. And I think that's what we have to remember in those moments, not to minimize the feelings that we're feeling, because they are real. And the Lord does know that. He knows how hard even the simplest things are for us to do sometimes. And I'll tell you, every time I meet with my girlfriend and we go over this whole interview process, like I said, it's so monumentally hard for me that I literally have to go home and take a nap sometimes, because my brain is so tired from having to do this. But I'm like, okay, but all my synaptic connections in my brain, they're growing, they're strengthening. So that's a positive, as I'm going through this, but it's hard, So, as I go through these processes, I'm like, what walls need to come down? What boundaries do I need to put up? What conversations do I need to have? What insecurities do I need to work through? In this season of life, I'm like really pushing into this because I'm starting to see or feel, okay, the Lord's doing something, and I'm trying to get the most out of it during this season, but still isn't easy. And I hold on to something that I heard a lady say years ago. We can't drive forward looking in the rearview mirror, and she pulled that from Isaiah 43:18. It's like, you think about that. If you're in your car and you're trying to go forward looking in your rearview mirror, but you're hanging on to all this stuff from the past, and well, I can't because of this and I can't because of that. You might go straight for a few feet or a few yards, but you're not going to make it to the end of the street because you're so worried about all this stuff that has a hold on you that there's no forward momentum for the growth piece of it. So that's been something that I've always held on to in these times. Okay, let's let go because I want to move forward, even if it's hard. And then, how do we find joy? How do you find a sense of peace during these difficult times? And I have finally, my conclusion in this would be, it's not so much a ha-ha joy, a ha-ha happiness, it's a contentment. It is a peace and a contentment that you find in the midst of your situations. We've heard of the peace that passes understanding, and you're like, okay, that's good for them, it's good for that. My life's in the tank right now. I have no peace or I have no joy. But that peace comes from knowing what the Lord has done for you in the past that you can pull from to strengthen. In Philippians, Paul wrote, I've learned to be content in whatever circumstance. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. And that man went through it. He's been shipwrecked. He's been, in jail. But he was content. And it wasn't the situation. It was the peace that he had within him. And I can say, I have learned that contentment. I've learned to be content with where I'm at, what I have. It doesn't mean that some days don't stink and I'm not in a ball of tears and, things like that. But overall, there's a peace because I know he has a plan and he'll work that plan out. And so, my question is, and I'm speaking to myself here. So if we know these chill hours and these wildernesses and these deserts that we're in is where God does something new in us, where he's growing us and bringing us to the next level, trying to get the optimal growth and productivity out of us, why do we automatically go to the negative? Why is it the bottom's falling out? Why is it the worst case scenario? Shouldn't I be more excited, waiting for God expectantly to show me what he has? And so I've just been really thinking about that. So, all right, just a little glimpse into the Gilly world. Into everything. So back in December, I was laid off. So that's why, obviously, I'm looking for a job. So here we are in May. Yeah. So you can see that little bit of apprehension and anxiety. So what would it be like if I was like, let me tell you, the Lord is so good. I lost my job. I cannot wait to see what he has in store for me. It just puts a whole different twist on it. He keeps bringing up this one thing I don't want to have to deal with. But he must be doing something good. We must be close to a breakthrough. What would people think if I talked like that instead of, I got laid off. It's been 4 months. I haven't found a job. My inner self would be buoyed. You guys would have a whole different perspective. You'd be like, holy cow, well, look at her. I'm trying to get there. I really am. I'm trying to be like, you know what? I know he has the right job for me. Oh, Lord, help me with this interview. But what would it really do for the people's faith listening to that side of the story versus, okay, I stink at interviews, my brain freezes, versus, I know he has a plan, we're working through this. And I think that's where I am now. I'm like, okay, I've identified the issue. I am proactively working to work through that. So I know he has the right job. And of course I know that in the back of my head. But when you're paying your bills for that month, it's a different story. But what would it do? What would it do to my inner self if I spoke like that constantly? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I know it's around the corner. Oh, I can't wait. Oh my goodness, the situation with my child. Even though it's hard, I know the Lord's working through it, instead of, here we go again. It's just about perspective is what it is. And we're human, and the Lord thankfully understands that. And we're very, finite in our perspective. Where right now it's our immediate issues, but God has the full picture. He sees, and thankfully He's gracious to understand our humanity in all of this. And I'm so thankful for His grace. I cannot even tell you through these situations. But even David, and we know David slayed bears and lions. He took down Goliath, but he was running from Saul. And when he was running from Saul, he's hiding in a cave. And while he's hiding in the cave, he wrote, it was Psalms 13. And he says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me, having sorrow in my heart daily?" This is David. This man had done all these great things, and he's afraid of Saul. You're thinking, he took down Goliath and he's afraid of Saul? Because we know how the story ends, you're thinking, how could he doubt any of it? And the thing is David knew it, because when in Samuel he said, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion, the paw of the bear, will rescue me from the hand of the Philistines." And then in verse 45 of the same chapter, he says to Goliath, "You come against me with the sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel." So he knew what God could do, but yet he had to buoy himself. He had to pull himself back up. And in Psalms 13:5, he says, "But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." So he's not rejoicing, obviously, in his situation, stuck in a cave on the run, but because of what the Lord had done. He's pulling from what the Lord had done previously to keep himself buoyed in this particular time in his life. And I have a great support team around me who is there and has supported me and has watched the tears shed. But I still have to buoy myself, because when I'm in my house, they're not there to cheer me on. So that peace, that contentment comes from my trust and my confidence in knowing what the Lord has done for me in the past. Because he has done, and I can recount many things that he has done, and I know it's him, because there's no way I could have done it for myself. Where was I? And also in Numbers and Isaiah, the Lord talks about his hand isn't shortened. He can redeem. His hand's not shortened to save. His hand isn't shortened to deliver. So it's like you have to know this as you're walking through it. And it's the knowledge of him in the past, of what he's done in the past, that gives us our peace right now. And again, many years ago, I went through a very difficult time when the Lord gave me my dog and gave me my hobby of running. Again, to sustain me during this very difficult time that, again, I didn't know how I would survive it. I had done a Bible study maybe a year prior. It was a Beth Moore Bible study. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her, but she's fantastic. And she said, she was talking about a story or a situation the Lord was dealing with her about an insecurity that was debilitating to her. It never ever happened, but in her head, if the scenario happened, it was going to just debilitate her. And through her conversation she had with the Lord, it was kind of like, the Lord would be like, okay, if this happened, what would be the result? And her thing was, you would still be Lord. And he goes, if this happened, what would be the result? And her answer was, you would still be Lord. And so at the end, she was like, even if the worst case scenario happened, he is still Lord. And that even if was like a lifeline to me at that moment, in that particular time in my life, because even if the Lord did not answer my prayer in the way I wanted it answered, he's still the Lord. He's still there. And he didn't answer my prayer at all. It was completely opposite of what I asked for or what I wanted in the outcome. But during that time, I took an Expo marker, and on my bathroom mirror, I wrote even if. And on every picture in my house that had glass, I wrote even if. So no matter where I looked, on the days where it was so overwhelming, even if, he's still Lord. He is still Lord, even if. And that got me through months and months of an anxiety to where I could sleep with peace at night, because even if, he's still Lord. And it's like, if he's Lord, what does that mean? You know, he's going to sustain me. He is going to make sure I have and I'm supported and I need in that situation. And I think sometimes we need to be mindful what we ask and what we pray for, because what he gives us, even if he answers our prayers, can be completely different than what we thought, that it can still be overwhelming. It's been over a year, but there was a situation that came up, and I was just praying, Lord, you know, I wanted him to handle this situation. And then in January, he did. He gave me exactly what I'd asked for. But I didn't realize what I was asking for. And in human eyes, the situation looks 10 times worse now than before he answered my prayer. And I did not immediately see it. And it took a girlfriend to tell me, he answered your prayer. He gave you exactly what you wanted. But I didn't want it that way. And I have to stand and believe that even though the situation is as it is now, he's preparing me, and he is going to provide, and he is going to bring me out on the other side of this, to where only I'm able to say it's because of the Lord. Because had I have known this was the outcome, I don't think I would have asked or prayed for that, because of where it put me. So again, I think the grace of God of not knowing is better than knowing sometimes, because what he has in plan for me is better than what I thought I needed in the way I wanted the situation to be. But he's preparing me for what's to come. And I can honestly tell you that I have an excitement, an expectation, or an excitement in waiting for what he's going to give me, because I'll only be able to say it was because of the Lord. And again, so I think I'm just ending with this little meme that I had seen. And it says, what if everything going wrong is actually going right? What if your struggles are shaping you for something bigger? What if your setback was just part of the setup? Growth doesn't happen in front of a crowd. Our chill hours are alone, in the dark, when it's cold and ugly. That's when the best work in us is happening. So I think some of our contentment is just rephrasing our situations that we're in. Instead of it's going wrong, it's what does God have in store for us? What does he want to do in us? What is he trying to grow in us? What is he trying to get out of me? How much of Egypt needs to still come out of me in this time?